Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to What You Want. Thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at a different kind of high-impact Breitling sports watch. This is the Breitling Super Avenger Blacksteel limited edition, one of 3,000 made, 48 millimeters PVD black steel. This watch is arguably Breitling's in-house counterpoint to its own Breitling for Bentley line. Now, if you want to wear a big, expressive Breitling sports watch, you have options. Bentley is one of them. But traditionally, since that line bowed in 2002, they've been about the high polish. They've been about the flash. Breitling for Bentley, quite literally, is the wrist-borne equivalent of a Bentley rolling on full chrome with spinners. Whereas this Breitling Super Avenger Blacksteel, 48 millimeters, certainly no wilting daisy. This is not a shy one. This is not a discreet watch either. But it's more like the murdered-out Eldorado. Tinted windows, black wheels, de-chromed, no polish. It's a completely different aesthetic. It's a completely different sensibility. But again, the impact at the end is the same. It's simply a matter of taste and sensibility. So let's check it out. Let's put it on the wrist. Let's talk about what makes this Blacksteel limited edition special. Talk about the Super Avenger generally. And then unpack some of the features of this watch. Now on the wrist, you can see 48 millimeters. And it wears every single one of them. There are some watches that wear small for their size, there's some watches that wear big, and then there are some that are dead on. I would have to say that on my 6 1/3 16 centimeter wrist, this Breitling Super Avenger Blacksteel wears a little bit bigger than its 48, and I think that's both true in terms of how it feels and the visual effect. Now you could see, whereas some really big watches, I'm talking well over 45 millimeters, that kind of class, use very, I would say, squat 1-to-1 aspect ratio cases with almost no lugs. Think Panerai Luminor 1950 47 millimeter case, or Hublot Big Bang King Power. Even King Power is a better example. At 48 millimeters, those watches are pretty squat, cushion shaped, and they don't project much from the diameter of the bezel itself, so they sit fairly small for their size on the wrist. Whereas with this Breitling, you have a more traditional case shape. You can see that the lugs flare out and extend and taper in a very traditional sports watch case fashion. They're not curbed roughly where you could see the bezel ends, as so many of the large watches are. They flow outward and they project downward, and because of that, the watch feels 50 plus, and it looks the part too. Almost 18 millimeters thick. This one's not going to slip under a dress cuff. It's not going to slip under any kind of tight long sleeve. Short of a thick winter coat or a very loose sweater, a parka maybe, this is one for short sleeves, but that's okay because this is a watch for the good times, the sun, the surf, the beach, the water park, the weekend. Anything though except, I would say, black tie and tight sleeves. But for those occasions when you wear this watch, I mean, what a statement, what a visual. First, let's talk about that case. Although it is big, it's also very expressive, and the elegance of a traditional tapered lug, and you can see it tapers both longitudinally and transverse. It actually has tumble home from side to side. It tapers off to the side as well as down and away longitudinally. Beautifully detailed. It's got a little bit of a grace to it in spite of its size. And then there's another feature that I really like that adds impact to the watch, and that's Breitling's bezel. Now this bezel features two elements of interest that I'm going to highlight. The first one would be these circumferential bezel bolts. Now these aren't just eye candy. They're not there to add a technical look, although they certainly accomplish that. They're actually here to hold the bezel to the case, and they allow a much more secure connection than if it were simply a snap-on bezel, as so many sports watches are. When we decase these watches in-house for service, we actually have to remove these bezel bolts because they are holding that bezel on securely. It's cool, it looks great, it adds sort of a techno-industrial neato factor to the watch, but it's also highly functional, and it's just another example of how Breitling really builds them tough. Now the other element that I like would be the rider tabs. Now the rider tabs are a signature of the Chronomat and the Avenger series, but what they bring to the table besides a different look is practicality. Now this is a nice stiffly sprung ratcheting bezel. You can use it for timing dives. You can use it for timing any interval up to 60 minutes by aligning the index with the minute hand. But what you really get from the rider tabs is the ability to use that bezel when your hands are wet or if you're wearing gloves. There are plenty of sports watches that have the ratcheting unidirectional bezel, but you can't get any kind of purchase on them unless you have perfectly dry, clean, bare hands. Not the case here, and the rider tabs are part of that. They're part of that equation. So very thoughtfully designed bezel, also very nicely detailed. It adds a lot of character to the watch. Moving further inwards down this dished sort of chapter ring to the dial, you have several layers of depth. First, there's the dished chapter ring. It's concave and it moves downward to the main dial. A tritone is applied, probably the sportiest that you can find on bikes, cars, or watches. You have black, you have red, and you have white. All used judiciously. Red is an accent, white is a secondary, black is the primary. Very nicely done by Breitling. And you can see that the 0 to 100 scale on the chapter ring gives way to a white minute and seconds track. Then there are traditional Avenger, or Super Avenger I should say, Arabic numerals. Now, because the Super Avenger is so big and you have so much dial real estate, traditionally they have used the Arabic numerals, although sticks have become available more recently. Arabics don't fit on smaller dials in all cases. A lot of watches use dot or stick indexes to make up for the fact that they just don't have much dial to play with. On the Avenger, the Arabics look great, they're very expressive, plus they add tremendous legibility without crowding this enormous dial. So 2 points in favor of a very large watch: legibility and the use of elegant complementary traditional Arabic numerals. And then finally there's that depth I talked about. Moving downward from the chapter ring to the main dial, you finally move into the cutout sub-registers. You see more splashes of color with the red sub-register hands. There's also an interesting half guilloche pattern on each of those. Now I'm going to try to move the watch in the light here so you can see that. Now I'd say you can sort of see it at 12 o'clock, but you can see how half of the sub-register dial is actually, now you can see it, is actually darker on the 3 o'clock side and lighter on the 9 o'clock side, and that's because there is a beautiful vertically striated guilloche on there. And this dial, for all of its scale and its impact, for all of the flamboyance of the watch, is very nicely detailed. Those complementary tritone colors, red, white, and black, the gloss of the dial, the half guilloche, I should say, of the sub-registers, and then finally those polished chapter rings around each of the sub-registers, they really set each other off, and there's a potentiation factor here that really magnifies the effect of each beyond the sum of the parts. I really like the look of this watch, and just like the bezel, when you start to unpack the content of this dial and how it goes about creating its effect, you realize how much thought went into it. Although this is a high-impact watch, it's got a little bit of a scalpel to it. It's not just a bludgeon. Very sharp, very thoughtful on Breitling's part. And the watch also has other thoughtful features. Being a Breitling, it is chronometer certified, as all Breitlings, quartz and mechanical, have been since 2000. Uses a Breitling caliber 13 based on the bomb-proof Valjoux 7750 automatic chronograph movement. This could be your only watch. Automatic winding with a date and the chronograph. You have all of the essential features for a modern mechanical luxury watch. Set it and forget it, put it on, and occasionally correct the date when you run into a non-standard month. Other than that, this is about as maintenance-free as a luxury watch gets. No complex complications to set, no moon phase to worry about. There's nothing extraneous about the design because, again, you have so much real estate to work with. You can have full Arabics, technical calibrations, a triple register chronograph, and a date, and it doesn't look crowded. On this beautiful Breitling Pro Diver rubber strap, it feels beautiful on the wrist, even if it's quite obviously large. But there are some who love the big watch style, and then there are some whose wrists are just so burly a small watch won't do, and this watch is great for those too. So between the complications, the accuracy of the chronometer-grade movement, the fact that it's an auto winder with all the features you could conceivably want, 300-meter water resistance to go toe-to-toe with any Submariner, the bottom line is you're getting a lot of content here, and you're getting it in a package with all the impact of a Bentley, but with a different take on that high-impact watch look. Big, black, murdered out with the exception of that high-visibility dial. This is an outstanding watch for someone who wants to make an impact, but do it in somewhat unconventional fashion. Now, to see all of the detail of this fantastic dial, the bezel, that 48mm PVD steel case, I encourage you to visit our website, watchyouwant.com, where we have high-resolution images of this Breitling Super Avenger Blacksteel limited edition with all original Breitling boxes, papers, manuals, and accessories. Check it out on our website, and if you're looking for something that's less bling, more black, I have a feeling this Breitling Super Avenger Blacksteel might be just the watch you want.